Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so what does it mean to reflect on being shaped, to be molded, indeed to be remolded by God? I don't know about you, but I can think of all kinds of examples when I look back in reflective mode. And I think we are in reflective mode as a nation at the moment, aren't we? Because of the death of our Queen, the accession of a new king, and that sense of the change of eras and the passing of time, we are maybe in reflective mode. But to think about the ways in which we have been shaped over the years. I introduce myself at the moment. I travel around Yorkshire. I've been in post for 2 years in my current role, but I've been in Yorkshire a rather long time. I've actually been in Yorkshire over 25 years now, and I spent 19 of those over on the east coast of Yorkshire. And because it's, of course, now my job, I was visiting a church where I'd once been minister for a very long time, but in a different capacity. And it was a strange experience, as I expected it to be, to find some posters on the wall that were still there, that I put up there 6 years ago, and they're still on the wall. Lots of other new stuff as well. I could see in the carpet the prints where I had stood Sunday on Sunday, because I only had one church, almost like I'd worn footprints in the carpet. And to reflect on what it felt like when I left that congregation some 6 years ago, to, of course, have a hope in my heart that in some way I had been able to shape that congregation over quite a long and a very happy ministry, but to have gone away with a profound sense that I had also been shaped by my time there, by my ministry, by the life of the congregation, by the gospel that we had sought to live out faithfully together, that I have been shaped. I'm sure that all of you could tell me stories of how you have been shaped over the years by individuals, by experiences, by chapters of your life, by the world around us and what is going on in it. And to have a strong sense within that God has been at work. Sometimes when we reflect on that sense of being shaped, it can be absolutely and without any question a positive experience. Sometimes it might be quite mixed, because there will have been good times and bad. Of course, there will have been. Sometimes there may have been immense challenges in terms of being shaped and indeed reshaped, painful times of loss, times when things seemed utterly understandable in terms of what's going on. But overall, to have that sense of gratitude that we have been shaped, and not only by one another, but that God's hand has been within it. That's at the heart of our reflections today. And of course, it is at the heart of our reading from Jeremiah. Jeremiah, of course, one of the longer books in the Old Testament. Jeremiah, who prophesied for a very long time. He was actually, his ministry covers a period of some 50 plus years. And during a time when the fortunes, dare I say, of Judah, the nation to whom he was prophesying, changed really quite radically. A people who experienced changes that were painful, destructive, hard to understand, and took them from heights to lows. And yet we hear in Jeremiah this profound faith that it is God's hand ultimately that is doing this shaping. Are you strong enough for a bit of Old Testament history? Just to put a bit of flesh to that, okay? I'm not going to examine this at the end, so you're okay. But Jeremiah starts in the reign of Josiah. Josiah, one of Judah's more successful kings. He's able actually to bring the nation of Judah to a time of renewal, a time of a revitalized spirituality, largely because at the time the big empire, the main empire on the block was Assyria, and Assyria's power was starting to wane. And so there was a bit of a vacuum and a little bit of time of peace and tranquility. And Josiah was able to actually reign as he wanted to reign and to bring the people back towards a spirituality focused on Yahweh. But political vacuums, as we well know, don't last very long. And there is a new power on the block rising. It's a new empire. So whereas Assyria tends to be more to the northeast, this is an empire in the east, and it is the empire of Babylon, which will be a familiar term to us. And then to the south, we've all got Egypt, which of course is an empire of times past. And because there's a new force in the area, Egypt and Assyria decide they're going to join forces to try and put down the rise of Babylon. In order to do that, Egypt from the south has to march up through Judah to join forces with Assyria. And Josiah decides he wants to put a stop to it and decides to fight the Egyptians. It's a disastrous policy because not only does he lose the battle, but he also dies in the battle. And so Judah becomes absolutely subservient to Egypt. It has to pay tribute, and Egypt puts the new king on the throne in Judah. Not the one who was actually succeeded from his father, but actually a king called Jehoiakim. And so Jehoiakim has to pay tribute to Egypt up until, of course, Babylon then defeats Egypt, and then he has to pay tribute to Babylon, and now decides that he's going to join forces with Egypt in order to, again, fight off the Babylonian rise to power. Again, it's disastrous because Babylon advances on Judah. Jehoiakim dies before the Babylonian forces arrive. His son succeeds him. His son is called Jehoiakim. Rather unfortunate because it gets a bit confusing now, but it is his son. And his son is taken into captivity by Babylon, and the Babylonians put a new king on the throne. It's actually his uncle, Zedekiah. Eventually, after a few years, Zedekiah also rebels. And that we've got now to 587. And that's when Babylon comes in and completely destroys Jerusalem, takes all the leading inhabitants off, including the king. And that is the end of the nation of Judah to all intents and purposes. Can you see, in all that complexity of world events, in all that shift of power, how it would have seemed to the people of Judah that their lives were being shaped not by God, but by political forces that were quite beyond their understanding or control. And it's into that situation that Jeremiah speaks his word of faith, that this is God the potter. And if from their experience, it feels like things are being thrown away, broken up, destroyed, nonetheless have faith that God's purposes are working out. It is God who does the shaping. Even when things seem far from God's purposes, still it is God who's doing the shaping. And in all this, God's redemptive purposes are being worked out. And I think we can interpret that faith of Jeremiah into our New Testament faith. Because we would talk, would we not? Our New Testament scriptures talk, do they not, about being shaped in a Christ-like way. Isn't that what we are here to be and to do? To try to be a body of people who are shaped in a Christ-like way. And because it is a Christ-like way, it is also a cross-shaped way. And it is not always easy or straightforward to understand how God's purposes are being worked out. But we hold to that faith that God is the potter. God is the one in whose hands we are held. And I wonder what we can say on an anniversary service about that sense of being shaped by God. And I'm sure, again, there are many stories that you could tell me of how you have been shaped over the years by your involvement in the life of the church. And maybe sometimes that's a little bit more being church-shaped than being Christ-shaped. It's one of the hazards, I think, of our calling to church. And therein, of course, lies a whole other question, the extent to which the shape of our church is a Christ-shaped church. But as Jeremiah was testifying, sometimes that shaping is actually a reshaping. And I wonder what stories you could tell me about being reshaped as the people of God. And there's one story that I know you can tell, because is it 19 years that you've been working together of two congregations from two traditions, but becoming one congregation and being reshaped? And I suspect that is an ongoing story for you. Certainly my conversations with the local ecumenical partnerships, that story doesn't end, that you are being reshaped. But hallelujah, that you are, and that you are part of that story. And even when it is painful, even when it's hard to see how all these bits of the jigsaw fit together, nonetheless, God's redemptive purposes are being worked out. And what are the challenges ahead? In what way is God calling us not only to acknowledge that we have been shaped, but to know that we are also being reshaped in a Christ-like way, in a cross-like way, towards a fuller expression of that grace and love and mercy that we know in Jesus Christ.